Hey, this is Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and welcome to another installment of Footloose Friday. Today, we're exploring Spanish hemstitching. Now, Spanish hemstitching is just a way of putting two pieces of fabric together in a very different way because it leaves a little gap. You might see it on my blouse here, but you've also seen it on pillowcases, pillows, all sorts of kinds of things. And it's just really a nice way to add embellishment, play with your machine, play with some decorative stitches, and have a lot of fun. So I'm using a BERNINA 880 Plus because I'm still working out of my apartment here while we wait for the house to get its finishing touches. So hopefully next month, you'll see me in a totally new venue. How about that? So let's get started and explore how creative you can be with this tool. So we find ourselves at another Footloose Friday, and of course, Footloose Friday is live and in person in our store, and then you get this lovely recording on Monday evening. So happy Monday evening to all of you. So let's have a look at this guy. So this attachment is actually needs to be used with another foot, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, maybe we need to talk about how we do these Footloose Fridays. So we make a project, and the project is a pennant piece that can then be strung along with other pennants just to have a little reminder of what you made and your practice. You can download the template right here and then print it out. You will have to print 2 pages and attach them, but this will give you the size of the pennant that you need to create. So you see me working from this presentation deck, right? And you might want to know, well, where can I find this? Well, if you sign up for Footloose Friday, it's $15. You are going to get all of this presentation deck with the little helpful tips and the links to all of the videos and all of those things. So help a girl out if you want. If you like what you see and you want to sign up for this, when you sign up, you're going to get an email sent directly to you from us that contains this interactive PDF. I will also mention that there's a special page in here that gives you a special discount on the BERNINA number 20 feet and the Spanish hemstitch attachment itself. You get 25% off when you use the special code that you find in the coupon of your presentation deck. I mentioned that this works in conjunction with the presser foot number 20 or number 20C or even number 20D. And obviously, if you have one of those entry-level BERNINAs like the 325 or a 435, you don't use the C feet, so you would have limitation as to how wide you can do your Spanish hemstitching. We made a tutorial right here, the Spanish hemstitch attachment tutorial. You might want to check that out. And then we applied our Spanish hemstitch work when we made the video copying your favorite blouse, and that is a 2-part video. BERNINA also made a Spanish hemstitch video, and then there's also hemstitch pillowcases and tote bag with Spanish hemstitch attachment tutorials for you as well. And the tote bag with the Spanish hemstitch attachment is using all sorts of techniques, but here you can see them using this is what the Spanish hemstitch attachment looks like on the machine. So the supplies are fairly simple. Anything goes for fabric, but I always like to repurpose or rebrand certain things. So I'm using a binding fabric from Art Gallery Fabric, and there's several different kinds. And then I used these either in my serger to create kind of like a ribbon, or I cut them a little bit wider and folded them over with my iron to give me those little pre-folded strips. Now, if you want to see more of these fabrics, you can just click the link here, and then that takes you to the section of our website where it shows all of the different binding fabrics that you could use. And there's a ton of them, and we get more and more every day. So we're using the featured King Tut 40 weight 3-ply cotton variegated thread. That's what it looks like right there. And I put that in top and bottom, and I paired it with an 80 top stitch needle. I think the recommended needle for the King Tut is 90, but I wanted to go down just a little bit smaller with my needle when I worked with my folded piece. So if size 90 top stitch needle is working for you, that's great. I'm also using this super heavy La Espiga nylon cord for couched hem stitching. And that is really like about 1/8 of an inch in diameter. So that is really thick. You can't put that through your needle. You are simply going to sew this on or let this Spanish hemstitch attachment hold it in place while you do so. If you choose to incorporate using a serger in this exercise, well, you might want to use the soft lock thread for a serger rolled hem. What it is, it's a little bit similar to woolly nylon, but because this is poly, you can iron it. And also it is going to give you a lovely stitch out because the fuzzy thread kind of fills in the gaps so that rolled hem looks just like a lovely little satin stitch on the edge of your fabric. Once you have your soft lock thread, you're going to also pair it with matching Ceracore thread in your serger. And Ceracore is what we use for our standard overlocker or serger thread. And then I mentioned the Bernina number 20 and number 20 C or D feet for use with the Spanish hemstitch. So little disclaimer, even though you may be using a machine that takes coated feet, you may want to pick up a number 20 regular foot that does the 5.5 millimeter if you want to do the small Spanish hem stitching. So here are the 3 feet to choose from. I'm not going to be using the D version of the 20 foot today. I'm simply using the standard 20 and the 20C. And then once again, about 5.5 millimeter versus 9 millimeter. This is just the different capabilities of the machine. So if your machine can sew a stitch width, like a decorative stitch width that's 9 millimeter, then you have a machine that takes 9 millimeter feet. And that means that your feed dogs are a little bit further apart. If your machine only goes to 5.5 millimeter, then you have a machine that can only go to 5.5 millimeters wide in stitch and can't take the coated feet. The current line, these machines are the Bernina 335, 435, 475, 485, 535, and the Bernina 735. Now, the new line Berninas, there's a pattern. If the machine number lands in 5, then its maximum stitch width is 5.5 millimeter. If the machine number lands in 0, then its maximum stitch width is 9. But that's not really the case if we go back even about 7 years or so. So just know what your machine can do. And we made a little video on 5 millimeter versus 9 millimeter on our YouTube channel, and you click the link right there if you choose to buy our presentation. All right, so we're just about ready to set up. Let's go over to the machine. I want to have a look at this blouse that I made. Now, this is stitch number 725 on pretty much all Berninas, and I had folded over my pieces. I also put a little modesty panel behind that, but this one was done on my 880 with the 9 millimeter wide feed dogs. The piece here that you see was done with my Bernina narrower foot, the number 20. And that maximum 5.5 millimeters. So you can see that you get a daintier, more demure stitch. So if you want them wider, you use the 9 millimeter. And if you want them narrower, you use that number 20. Let's do a narrower one first. And we just slip one of our narrower inserts into our piece with that rounded piece towards the foot. And this is designed to work with the number 20.5 millimeter foot. And then there are actually 4 inserts with this attachment that go on that little thin metal piece. And there are 2 for the 5.5 millimeter 20 foot, and there are 2 for the 9 millimeter wide, either 20C or 20D foot. And the difference between those 2 is the little opening that holds the cording. One's a narrow opening and one's a larger opening, just depending on what size cording you're using. And we're using the La Espiga, which is pretty thick, so we're using the larger attachment. You also are going to get a screw and a screwdriver to attach this to your machine. And I like to remove my little metal piece to put the little inserts on and off. I find it easier to take them on and off than if they're on the machine. And it's just really easy to take it on and off. And you probably have noticed that you have these little screw holes on your Bernina, and you just pretty much take this flat piece of metal and you slip the little nubbin into the hole on the right, and then you screw the screw into the hole on the left. And that's how it goes on. And like I said, we're going to be using the regular number 20. We're going to be using the smaller insert with the larger opening for the cording, and stitch number 725 to practice first. So the most important thing to do is to get those folded edges butted right up on either side of the Spanish hem stitch insert. Needle is swinging to the right. It's grabbing a piece of the fold, and when it's swinging to the left, it's grabbing a piece of the fold on the other side. In the middle, it's stitching on nothing at this point. And work in small pieces. This is, like a length of fabric that I'm doing. But sometimes it's a little bit easier if you work in like half the width or whatever. But nonetheless, working in long strips will kind of give you some practice in how you're maneuvering this. And my hands are in front of the Spanish hemstitch attachment, but I'm not pulling it through. I'm not doing anything. I'm just letting and trusting the machine to feed it through for me. And in this application, I am using that regular number 20 foot on my Bernina 880, and everything is working like a charm. And just as a reminder, the King Tut 40 weight 3-ply thread is in my needle, which is a size 80 top stitch, and I also have the same thread wound on the bobbin. No adjustments to the stitch at all. This is all default setting, just like I picked it on the machine. Tension, everything. And I'm just almost finishing up here, and it went very well. You can see my strips are a little uneven. Don't let that bother you. And then I don't cut my thread with the automatic needle cutter. I just use the cutter on the side of the machine, but look how pretty that looks. And look at how pretty that thread is. Yeah, this came out great. Let's switch to the 20C foot to do a wider Spanish hem stitch. And like I mentioned, I take my attachment off to swap out the inserts because it's pretty easy to do, And then we slip that guy back on, pull out the screwdriver, and reattach it. And I am using my Bernina 880, which requires that I tell it when I switch the foot. So I'm going to pick 20C this time when I switch my foot rather than the regular 20. All right. And then we just repeat this process again and see how it turns out with that wider looking stitch. After you've practiced a little bit with our stitch number 725, we can branch out a little bit, and that's what we're going to do. And I created a slide for you for the Spanish hem stitch tool to just remind you of the stitches that work the best. And in this slide with the top row, you can see those are the stitches where you can do them without any cording. And they're going to give you a slightly different look than what those stitches look like. However, they do perform quite well. The second row is the stitches that we're going to use with our actual cording in there. So just be mindful of that. And also please note that stitch number 1329 is actually 1343 on some 7 and 8 series models. So if you don't have a 1329, go ahead and look up 1343 on your machine. Another thing of note is that not all stitches are suitable for the Spanish hem stitch. You want to select open decorative stitches that move in a forward direction. And you'll easily find out which ones don't work as well just by trial and error. So here's where things get interesting. I'm going to attach my La Spiga cording in my freehand lever like that to hold it off of the floor and to keep it from tangling. And now I'm simply going to floss it down in my attachment here. And I've chosen to keep my number 20 C foot on and the wider look. Then I'm going to take a couple of my pieces that I edge stitched with my rolled hem on my overlocker, and I'm simply going to experiment with a couple of stitches. So this one is stitch number 627. And sometimes when I do the cording, I do want to sort of place my hand behind the foot just to make sure everything is kind of flattening out. We got a lot going on now with the introduction of this cording. And with this stitch, it's pretty much filling in the gaps between the cording, but kind of gently just holding that cording in the center between these two strips of fabric. So that's what you get with this stitch. And that may be what you're looking for. For me, if I'm going to put this cording in there, I want a little bit more movement from the piece. So that's why I'm going to be changing to stitch number 1343 on my 880, but it's 1329 on most other Berninas. And now with 1329, it kind of wiggles that La Espiga back and forth, and it creates this rickrack or serpentine kind of look to it. And this is just my absolute favorite stitch to use with the Spanish Hemstitch Attachment. I just love it. But I also want you to kind of experiment with all the other stitches on your machine, because you might find something that you fall in love with as well. Now looking at this, see how that looks way wigglier than that other stitch? So this is just proof that it takes all kinds and all tastes and lots of experimenting to get something that you might love or want to tweak. There's also another stitch. It's stitch number 623. And this one is really perfect if you want your cording to be super straight in between your two pieces of ribbon, your two pieces of folded fabric, whatever you're using. And this one creates that texture. It creates a stripe. It's really cool looking as well. And once you get all of your stitching done with sewing a set together, then you're going to cut the set, and then you're going to start joining the sets together. And as you do that, I really recommend that you toggle back and forth from using the cording to not using the cording to trying your own stitches and things like that. I do have one more trick up my sleeve for a stitch, and let's have a look at that one. So this stitch is number 702, and it's a ladder stitch. Oh, it looks like a ladder, but this is really a hem stitch. And it's triple, so it goes back and forth 3 times, and then there's a triple stitch on either the right-hand side and the left-hand side. And it's a little bit more challenging. You can see here I'm having to really hold my hands close to the stitching to do this. And this is one of those stitches where we can just leave the stitch like this, or we could choose to do something fancy to it afterwards. And what I'm choosing to do is add a triple straight stitch number 6 to this. And what that's going to do, it's going to take those little hem stitch stitches and it's going to bundle them. And it's just going to give it another look. And once again, you can leave it just as is. And in this little ladder, you could also weave like narrow ribbon in and out of it and things like that. I chose not to do that, but this one is just really fun and kind of versatile. Another stitch that I tried was stitch number 723, and this one requires a lot of attention. It's not like it's hard, it's just that if you sort of like take your eye off the ball for a minute, it might not catch, and it goes a little bit faster. And so maybe not for people that get distracted easily like me, right? But once you do all of your stitching and you get all of your little pieces together, you saw how I laid them out on the template that we created. Once I get them all stitched together and everything, the rest of this process is super easy. You're just going to cut 3 pieces from that template. You're going to cut a cutaway stabilizer piece. You're going to lay fabric on the front and the back of it. And then we're going to take the work that we just created and lay that down. And then you're going to trim everything down to the size of that template. And you're going to stitch, same thread in the machine, but now we're going to switch to a clear foot and do a zigzag stitch around the angled sides of the pennant. And then I also prepped a casing using our binding fabric, pretty much like we've been doing it. This month, I didn't put the heavy interfacing in there, and I think it's going to be fine. So I just folded the edges in, pressed, and then inserted the work in it, top stitched it, and then my pennant's done. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy using this tool. I hope you enjoy really coming up with some fun and unique ways of using it. And next month, we are going to be using the number 46C pintuck foot, and there's even more stuff to do with that. And yeah, I used it on this blouse, so we might have to bust that out again next time. All right, if you want to see more videos and more fun things that we do right here on our YouTube channel, why don't you go ahead and subscribe and check us out? It's pretty easy. It's youtube.com/BERNINA of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Happy sewing.